In the corner of a dusty attic, a small hand trembled as it opened a faded leather-bound diary. The pages were brittle, smelling of age and ink, yet filled with secrets heavy enough to sink the heart. "Grandpa, what happened to you?" whispered the child, unaware that these words would unlock stories no one had dared to speak aloud. Outside, the world hummed along, indifferent, while inside, a silent storm of war, courage, and loss began to unfold, secrets buried beneath years of quiet dignity. The diary slipped from tiny fingers and landed with a muted thump against the floorboards. As the child's eyes widened at the trembling pages, a single line scrawled in careful handwriting stabbed through the air. "Some things are meant to be carried alone." In that moment, the attic seemed impossibly vast, the walls pressing closer as if listening. Somewhere far below, a television blared indifferently in the living room. No one noticed the discovery, no one, except the grandfather, who sat in his worn armchair, staring silently into the distance. A storm of memory tore through him. Years of unsaid words, of nights haunted by unseen battles, of friends lost and promises unkept, all pressed against the fragile barrier of his calm exterior. He did not speak, but the tension in his hands, the tightening of his jaw, betrayed the depth of a hidden war still raging inside. The child had always known Grandpa as quiet but kind, a man with hands scarred and calloused, yet eyes soft and patient. He moved slowly, as if weighing every step, and spoke rarely, but when he did, it was with deliberate care. Now, confronted with the diary, the child felt a flicker of fear and curiosity. Who was this man before the gentle voice, the warm smile, the soft chuckle? The grandfather rose, silent and measured. His fingers hovered over the diary, but he did not touch it. His face, normally calm, carried shadows. The faint tremor in his hand, the tightness around his eyes, the unspoken pain that had been buried beneath decades of quiet mornings and afternoon walks. His silence was not absence, it was armor, a barrier forged through years of battles no one could see. He had been 19 when the war came calling. Fresh-faced, hopeful, and brimming with youthful certainty, he left behind a small town, a family that clung to him, and a future he thought would always belong to him. The air of the battlefield was unlike anything he had imagined. The acrid tang of smoke, the coppery bite of blood, the constant, unyielding roar of distant artillery. Nights were colder than he had known, and sleep became a luxury stolen in brief, terrified moments. His closest friend, Thomas, had fallen beside him on the third night of a mission. He remembered the sound, the hollow, terrifying silence after the scream had ended. He remembered dragging Thomas into the mud, trying to hold his warmth, to cling to a life that had slipped through their fingers. Every detail was etched into him. The way Thomas's watch had stopped, the scent of his fear, the heavy, relentless guilt of survival. Years later, when he returned, he carried no medals, only memories, only the weight of decisions that had never been applauded, never acknowledged. He built a life of quiet routines, gardening in the early morning, reading the newspaper by the fireplace, tending to the small town's local events. To the world, he was just Grandpa. To himself, he was a man who had witnessed the unimaginable and learned to carry it alone, behind a mask of normalcy. At home, life seemed peaceful, but the quiet contained its own tension. His daughter had often urged him to speak, to tell the stories of heroism, of survival, of friends lost in faraway lands. He would only nod, offer a faint smile, and change the subject. To him, silence was sacred. It preserved the memory of the fallen without tainting it with words. Yet the world did not always respect silence. One afternoon, while attending a local ceremony honoring veterans, a young reporter approached him. Her notebook poised, She asked questions with the insistence of someone seeking drama. "Why didn't you ever speak of the battles?" she pressed. He looked at her quietly, the years folding into his gaze. His silence became a barrier, a subtle rebellion against intrusion, against the cheap consumption of profound suffering. Around him, the crowd whispered and shuffled, unsure how to respond. His quiet dignity stood in stark contrast to the clattering expectations of those around him. Everyday life carried smaller indignities. At the grocery store, a clerk would jokingly ask if he had been in any wars, prompting laughter from strangers. At community meetings, younger men would boast of minor achievements while he quietly nodded, never correcting them, never claiming his own. He had learned that honor did not need applause. The wrongs of the world did not always need immediate correction. The diary became a quiet catalyst. The child read lines of courage, terror, and loss that Grandpa had never spoken aloud. Each page revealed moments of extraordinary bravery, quiet self-sacrifice, and moral courage. The child's eyes widened. This man, gentle and unassuming, had endured horrors the world could scarcely imagine. Yet even in discovery, Grandpa did not react. His silence became a lesson. Words were sometimes weaker than the weight of lived experience. As the child read, they uncovered an entry that hinted at an injustice during the war. A comrade falsely accused, a mission misunderstood, a life nearly erased. The injustice had never been spoken of, never corrected, but it had shaped him. The child asked questions, desperate for answers. The grandfather's lips did not move. Instead, he handed the diary over, letting the child absorb the truth without interruption. His silence was not avoidance, it was trust, a teaching of responsibility, patience, and respect for the gravity of experience. One morning, news arrived that a local historian had discovered records confirming the grandfather's wartime heroism and the sacrifices he had made on behalf of his country. Crowds gathered, expecting speeches, accolades, and fanfare, but the grandfather remained seated, silent, letting the recognition arrive without fanfare, without ego. The community's response was a mirror of the moral lesson. Honor did not need to be claimed. It revealed itself in due time. Veterans who had served alongside him stepped forward, recounting stories of courage, resilience, and loyalty. Each word, each testimony, reinforced what had been silently lived. His strength had never depended on acknowledgement. The injustice of years past, the neglect, the casual disrespect, the unspoken horrors, was rectified not by anger or confrontation, but by the undeniable weight of truth. The antagonist, in this case the indifferent world that had overlooked his suffering, could not withstand the power of silent dignity. The grandfather's calm, unwavering presence, coupled with undeniable proof of sacrifice, became an overwhelming force. Moral justice unfolded quietly, yet definitively. The town square filled on a bright afternoon, sunlight dancing over faces that had once been oblivious. The grandfather stood, unassuming in his old jacket. Veterans and townspeople surrounded him, holding photographs, letters, and medals he had never received. The child, clutching the diary, watched as neighbors bowed their heads in silent respect. No words could fully capture the magnitude of recognition, yet silence carried the weight of centuries. The community had learned, finally, to honor the unseen battles, the quiet sacrifices, the untold stories. Tears welled in the child's eyes, reflecting both pride and newfound understanding. The grandfather, usually stoic, allowed a small, serene smile. He had not sought recognition, yet it had found him, not in noise, but in the reverent acknowledgement of truth. As dusk fell and the crowd dispersed, the child returned the diary to its worn cover, feeling the imprint of history and the lessons of courage. Grandpa sat beside them on the porch, silent yet profoundly present. The child finally understood. The loudest stories are not always the ones spoken. They are the ones lived, endured, and honored in quiet dignity. The world may overlook the battles we cannot see, but respect, compassion, and remembrance can travel through time, through generations, and into hearts willing to notice. Grandpa's silence was not emptiness, it was a legacy of strength. Wherever you are watching from, remember the unseen heroes around you. Honor the quiet courage and never underestimate the power of listening. Share your thoughts about the story, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe to explore more tales that celebrate true, silent heroism.